What is up, flag football fans, players, coaches? Welcome to the Biokats Weekly Flag Football Podcast. Here is your Week 1 recap of flag football action in both 5A and 4A in the beautiful state of Colorado. I'm your host, Coach Pitzs. In this first week, we'll mention every team that's in the win column. We'll talk a little bit on the stats, but there's not a ton in there just yet in Max Preps as coaches get caught up from a busy week getting the season kicked off. I am red in the face from getting sunburned like an idiot at our level 3 game yesterday. But there's picture day, there's media days, there's ongoing sub-varsity scheduling. It's a lot, but we are up and running and already a week in. So let's look back at week 1. We'll check out some early standouts and we'll look ahead to week 2. Here is where we're at in 5A in these first 5 schools. Have not allowed a single point yet through a couple of games. Valor is 2-0. Shutout wins over Doherty and in Fountain Fort Carson's first ever game. Chatfield goes 2-0. They beat their Dakota Ridge neighbors 14-0. Check out Dennis Plus's article in chessanow.com. He does an awesome job there. And they had a convincing win over Eagle Crest 31-0. I will talk more about some stars emerging for Chatfield and other schools. Rangeview 1-0. They dropped 44 in a shutout win over Aurora Central. Thunder Ridge, this defense is a problem. 27-0 over Manual, 14-0 over Vista Ridge. They held us to 6 or 7 points last year. My players are probably giggling at the inadvertent 6 or 7 reference. Hopefully that trend dies very soon. Legacy goes 1-0. They get a 6-0 win over startup program Monarch. Northfield's out to a 3-0 start with wins over Denver North, North Glen, and then exploding 52-zip over TJ. Arvada West with the starting debut of Emerson Drake. They beat Mullen 33-6. Grandview is 1-0. They win a grind of a game, 13-6 over Regis. Legend 2-0, much better start on offense this year, even though replacing 5 starters there with wins over Eagle Crest and Air Academy. Denver South 1-0. This is an underrated team. They went to Mullen and blew them out 38-7. And Mountain Vista with 2 early statement wins. Not an easy schedule. They go 42-7 win over Doherty and 46-6 over a very good Douglas County team. Yikes. Vista Peak Prep 2-0, scoring early and often, dropping 80 points combined on Aurora Central and Overland. Horizon, just 1 game in, but a big one with the season's most eyebrow-raising win. They beat Cherry Creek on that first Saturday, 24-14. Huge win for their program, and congrats to Coach French, won the Broncos Coach of the Week. So check out the article on him. Mountain Range, they win a close one over Cherokee Trail, 20-14. Arapahoe, they take out Heritage by extra points, 14-12, and Littleton, 27-6. Cherry Creek, a little slower start offensively than what they're used to, which is kind of tough when you play so many games early. It's hard to get the offense going, but now after wins versus Ralston Valley, Rock Canyon, and Regis, they are up to 3-1. Lakewood, major program on the rise, great coaching staff and drawing a lot of athletes to their program. They beat Wheat Ridge and Stanley Lake before dropping one up in the mountains to Steamboat Springs this week. Overland, 2-1. I'm excited for them to get their stats and max preps because they dropped 85 points combined over Thornton and Regis Groff before losing the Vista Peak Prep game. Heritage had that heartbreaker to their rival Arapahoe and then pitched a 13-0 shutout against Littleton. Ralston Valley, they were beating Cherry Creek late in that game before losing by 1 score, and they shut out startup program Golden 42-zip. Fountain Fort Carson, they took that beating like champs at Valor. That's, when it's your first game ever, that's going to happen. But then they get their first ever win, 24-0 over Palmer. Douglas County, things didn't go according to plan in trying to hang with Mountain Vista, but this very well-coached team goes up north Saturday and beats the 4A champs Mountain View 26-8. Plus then they shut out Vista Ridge 32-0. So a huge day for Douglas County. And we have Regis, tough schedule, losing to Columbine and Creek, but they get a 6-0 win over Eagle Crest. Let's check out what's going on in 4A so far. These standings, Colorado Springs Christian gets an 8-0 win over Palmer. Ponderosa shuts out Evergreen 7-0. Pomona took it to Highlands Ranch 42-2. We'll talk a little bit more about Jake Cordova in a bit and what they're doing up there. Steamboat Springs is 2-0. There's talent in the mountains. They had wins over Wheat Ridge and Lakewood, lighten up the scores a little bit. The Classical Academy has to be your favorite to win 4A right now. They grabbed 6 interceptions to beat a loaded Green Mountain team 26-8. I'll check out the article at chassanow.com on that game. And although this game was actually a lot more competitive than what the score indicates, it was just one big quarter for the Classical Academy. But lots more to talk about with that loaded team coming up. George Washington is off to a 1-0 start. They get a nice win over Vista Ridge, 18-8. Green Mountain, they pull off maybe the biggest 4A over 5A win in the state so far, beating Columbine 14-6, plus a convincing 32-point shutout over Dakota Ridge to bounce back after the TCA loss. Evergreen 1-1 after their loss to Pondo. They take it to Bear Creek, 32-0 win there. Palmer 1-1. They get a win over the Vanguard School, 26-0. Stanley startup program. The Gators get a win over Eagle Ridge Academy. Mountain View dropped 40 on Vista Ridge, winning 40-6. So they bounced back very well as well. Denver North beats Denver East 21-17. Air Academy did just enough on defense to beat an up and coming Highlands Ranch team 6-0. Manual, the Thunderbolts edge out Smoky Hill 21-18. Dakota Ridge got a 14-0 win over Golden. And Vista Ridge, this team needs some time to breathe. They've played 5 games. That's a third of your regular season schedule and a brutal schedule, but they were able to beat Smoky Hill 25-0. So let's scope out some early leaders. Obviously, this will change a lot as coaches catch up on stats. Of course, names like Ariana Akey and Addie Beck and other staples will be all over these lists as everyone gets caught up on the stats. But check out what Sailor Slaughter is doing with Lakewood. She's over 500 yards, 4 touchdowns. She's slinging it. They've actually got 3 or 4 kids who can throw the ball, but she's leading the Tigers right now. You've got Maddie Smolin. Maddie has more touchdowns, 11, than she has incomplete passes on the season so far through 2 games, with 8 incompletions and 11 tutties, and just 1 interception for Maddie Smolin, 142 quarterback rating so far. Faith Prinzo from Valor Christian, no surprise there after the monster year she had last year. She's one of the leaders in QB rating already. Caitlin Corcus, ton of upside for that kid. She's going to have a huge year. And I think it's interesting that Northfield has a couple kids who are slinging the ball. Ali Garcia, 249 yards already, and Azuri Woheen, 181 yards for Northfield in their 3-0 start. So, and you see Sadie Goodwin on the list there, Jordan Washington. You're going to see a ton of them this year on these leaderboards. Let's see, 4A passers, Savannah Plumley. You're going to see a lot of her. I know she had kind of a tough game with TCA. That's kind of hard on the first Saturday to play your first game as a freshman against such a good team, but dropped almost 500 yards now between the 3 games that she's played. She's up to 7 touchdowns. You're going to see a ton from her. Super, super talented kid. Kira Knowles is doing a good job at Mountain View. She's going to get more and more comfortable stepping into that role with the last year's runner-up team. Sienna Halverson's quarterbacking a startup team with Stanley Lake, almost 300 yards already under her belt in her young career. So a couple leaders there on 4A, but again, those numbers not very complete yet as coaches catch up on stats. So here are some scoring leaders so far for 4A and 5A combined. Green Mountain's stud football and basketball player. I don't know how tall Marissa Van Gilder is, but she's really athletic. I think she's got to be right around 6'1", if I would guess, but very, very talented, good target there. She's up to 6 touchdowns. Lucy Thompson from Legend. This kid, this is crazy. On Thursday night, she beats Valor on the softball diamond. She's batting almost 500 on the year for the Titans, and then she drives down to Air Academy, scores 3 touchdowns for us. in that game. Lainey Gonzalez for Lakewood putting up some numbers. Jordan Cochran's going to have a monster year for Thunder Ridge. She's already up to 3 touchdowns. And Jessica Hopkins with Mountain View already in the end zone 3 times for them. So let's talk a little bit about the purpose of the podcast. The reality is we are not going to be able to highlight every kid who makes an impact for their team. There just isn't enough time. Football is the ultimate team game. And so that's not the goal here. Not everything shows up in the stat line. We definitely want players to understand that there are going to be girls setting really tough screen blocks that change the game for your team that doesn't show up in the stat line. We're going to be kids who are running great routes but not always being rewarded with the football. Kids who are playing shutdown defensive coverage to the point where the quarterback doesn't even throw your way. So that doesn't get rewarded sometimes. But it's also a beautiful part of the game. And for players, we'll do our best to highlight as many of you as we can, but listen to the podcast every week to get a taste of what's happening in Colorado Flag. But go to your practice this week to do your job and just be a great teammate. That's much more important than putting up big numbers. So my goal is to get people talking about this game and what these girls are doing. So with that, here are a few coach shout outs from your coaches. And we're hoping that each week we get a ton of coaches just listing where your kids are standing out, how they're impacting the game and making your team better. So from Chatfield coach Alexis Rosholt, we have Ellie Buck. She's going to be a stud on both sides of the ball this year. She had 2 interceptions in their big win over Dakota Ridge, one at the 1-yard line to help preserve the shutout. And she also had a punt return that flipped the field for the Chargers. And then I saw another highlight, so check it out. I think it's on their team's Insta, and I got to get better at posting videos. I'm terrible with technology, but she had a sick, like an OBJ one-handed grab, and then she was just a track star to the end zone in that game. I believe that was also Ellie Buck. So, but then also Guy Ryan from Pomona, he's shouting out Jay Cordova. She's doing it on both sides of the ball. She has 4 passing touchdowns to 4 different receivers in their win over Highlands Ranch. Then if she's not scoring touchdowns, she's preventing the other team from scoring touchdowns because she grabs 2 interceptions and 5 tackles while playing safety. Total stud, doing it all for Pomona. And Coach Shane King from Thunder Ridge shouts out Jordan Cochran. She's off to a big start. I mentioned her 3 touchdowns on offense. She also had a pick 6 on defense, 8 tackles, a tackle for loss, a pass broken up. She had 8 catches for 76 yards. Total stud there for the Grizzlies. And I'll personally shout out legend robo athlete Raya Matoush. She is already up to 3 interceptions to start the year. She was an all-state linebacker last year, picking up where she left off. I mentioned some of our offensive standouts, but I'll mention her on defense. And hey, watch these games next week or this week. This is a huge week coming up in Monday's action. Pomona, Stanley Lake. Then we've got 2 heavyweights. Grandview heads to Jeffco to take on Columbine. Smoky Hill heads to Jeffco to take on Chatfield. Tuesday, Vista Peak Prep in Grandview. Rangeview came out swinging this year. They go to Cherokee Trail. Legend on the road to take on maybe the best 4A program in TCA. This game was added late. It's added odd time, so we'll be a little shorthanded, but we're going to give it a try against Kelsey Peterson and Reagan Harder and their very active, well-coached defense. Doherty faces that unscored upon Thunder Ridge defense. Arapahoe will try to slow down the state's top offense at Mountain Vista on Tuesday. Heritage will try to slow down Iris Duran from Denver South. And Horizon is back in action after their win over Cherry Creek, headed to Rock Canyon. Wednesday, Lakewood's biggest test as they host Pomona, and 3 must-watch 5A matchups, Columbine and Valor. Ralston Valley at Arvada West, major rivalry game there, and Mountain Vista at Cherry Creek. Yikes. I need to widen my broadband streaming bandwidth for this week's games, at least for the coaches who aren't hiding their live streams, but that's a conversation for another day. Thursday, definitely intrigued by this Chatfield at Thunder Ridge game. 2 of the Colorado's best defenses. George Washington at Denver South could be a high scoring one. And the biggie is Mountain Vista taking on Arvada West. Both teams will be playing on a back to back, and this game could determine who's in the driver's seat for the state's #1 seed in late October. Friday, Chaparral is finally in action. I think smart scheduling there to wait to play until late in week 2. So many teams struggle offensively early because they just haven't had enough time to gel. So look for Shap to hit the ground running in their first game. They host Grandview Friday afternoon. It is Protestants versus Catholics as Regis hosts Valor on Friday. And Saturday, there are 19 games highlighted by Horizon at Pomona, and Horizon also playing Ralston Valley in a tournament setting on Saturday. Boom. So that's what I've got for you, coaches. Your participation is hugely appreciated. Complete the Google form with your standout performances so we can mention your kids. I pull stats from Max Prep's Sunday mornings at 7 a.m. to prepare for the weekly podcast. So the sooner the better on getting those stats in, but I know that it is a big chore. Did I screw up some names? What corrections do you have? Go easy on me. If you didn't receive the link, also hit me up, Darren Pitzner at gmail.com. Follow us at Hoops Tracker, at Coach_Pitts, or at the Biokats. If you missed the 4A, 5A season previews, check them out. They are also on this YouTube channel. Otherwise, we'll see you next week on the Biokats Weekly Flag Football Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Pitts. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.